Hi, this is Mike Rothman. I'm General Manager of TechStrong Research, and I am excited to host Automox's For Fix's Sake series. And this month, we're going to be talking about automating your IT and SecOps teams. For Fix's Sake, man, I love that name. So automation, right? It's no secret that we have severe skills gaps in the area of both IT and security operations, right? That's not a secret. I mean, all we talk about is it's hard, whether it's the Great Resignation or really just the challenge. And this isn't just a thing that has happened prior to COVID, right? This isn't just a new thing. We've been struggling with the idea of fully staffing our operations teams for a long time, right? And automation has been presented as really kind of one of the answers, right? One of the solutions to this problem, right? It promises to level the playing field to address a lot of these resource issues on paper anyway. And why is it that I mentioned that, right? Why is it that I said on paper anyway? Because there are always historically been resistance to automation. Again, some of these are for good reasons. Sometimes it's not so good reasons, right? Many of you may have seen The Terminator way back when, right? The classic movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger and Linda Hamilton spawned off many different sequels, as well as a number of theme park rides and all sorts of other things. But I've always kind of joked about the fact that folks were resistant to automation because they saw Terminator and they were very concerned about Skynet taking over our networks and becoming, really aware and creating all sorts of problems that, kind of ended up in the situation that we found ourselves in with Terminator. Of course, that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but the reality is we still have a lot of resistance to automation for a fairly straightforward reason. A lot of us in the operations space kind of pride ourselves on our ability to do things, our ability to get stuff done. If we let the machines do things, what does that really mean for us? So there's resistance, and this resistance we have to start to work through, right? So on today's panel, we're going to address the good, the bad, and the ugly of automation, and most importantly, give you a solid perspective on the why, the what, and the how regarding really how you can get started in automation. What are the key use cases? How do you really handle this in an operational context in order to make your environment work as efficiently as possible with the resources that you have, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish today. But first, we have some housekeeping to do. Of course, you are in the interface now. So let's go over a few quick tips so that you understand how to navigate in this environment. The main stage tab, this is where you'll see the first half of the event. If you are watching this, you're in the right place. So listen in to see which session will suit your needs. And check out the resources that we've added, a number of different papers, a number of links, and the like to give you as much information about automation as you possibly can. Q&A, that is button number 2 on your slide, will be moderated and remain hidden. We'll try our best to respond, and if we can, we'll get an answer to you via email or via the Automox community. You can find that link to the community below or in the chat. Polls, interested in your situation, pick your answer. Again, we want to factor your feedback into this event, so please answer the polls. We also have a chat capability. That is number 4, right? An open forum to engage with others. If you prefer anonymity, you can use the Q&A, right? The Q&A, again, not something that's going to be public, so we can just kind of surface that during the breakout sessions. In terms of the sessions, join the speaker session that resonates with you most as we get to the breakouts today. And again, the schedule on the reception tab will give you a sense of everything that's going on in this event, because I know there are a number of moving pieces. And if you have any technical issues, the reception tab has an area for the best experience with a guide and troubleshooting tips to help. You will receive recordings from today's event. Share them with a colleague, catch up on all the sessions, and enjoy yourself, right? I mean, we're here to learn, we're here to share information, we're here to hopefully figure out how we can bring automation to the forefront in your operational environments. That is why we're here. So let's talk a little bit about the agenda. We will start with a panel discussion, challenges and pain points. We have a great panel. We'll introduce them in a couple of minutes. They're bringing their knowledge and based on, some of their experiences regarding automation. And again, we're going to have a nice spirited, hopefully not too contentious type of discussion around automation. Then we're going to talk about trends. We're going to discuss some of the trends in the use cases where automation can really make a difference. And our speakers will provide their perspective on each of those use cases and why they make sense in order to start to investigate those. And then we'll go into our breakout sessions. We're going to have two interesting sessions to dig into a lot deeper on the topics, breaking barriers, to really understand how we can start to overcome some of these cultural issues regarding automation. And we're also going to talk about low code, no code, or low code, no show, fantasy or reality, and really to dig into the idea of no code solutions and how those can aim to automate a number of the different activities that we have going on. So with that, let's move into our panel discussion. But first, we need to introduce our panelists. So I am joined by a fantastic panel of folks today. I mean, really, of all the folks we could, kind of get together to talk about a topic like automation, on security and IT and some of the dev topics. Great panel here. So why don't I just have everybody introduce themselves for, a minute or two, talk about who you are, what company you come from, kind of what your day-to-day life is, and maybe a little bit about, kind of how automation has changed your world. Although I know we'll be digging into that for the next, 50 minutes to an hour anyway. So Colby, why don't we start with you?
Sure thing. So yeah, my name is Colby Hall. I'm the system administrator here at Automox. Work on a lot of automation for IT process and procedures, as well as performing endpoint management on a lot of our end user devices around here. Also helping the security team with monitoring device compliance, assisting engineers with some of their projects that require some automation work, as well as access-based controls. And have to say, probably couldn't do a lot of my job if it wasn't for automation. So gotta say it's very necessary.
Yeah, just provides leverage, right? Kind of without the ability to, kind of have the machines do what the machines do. Life would be a lot harder on that front. Great. Thanks, Colby. Great to have you here. Randall?
Yeah, I'm Randall Pipkin, Senior Security Engineer with Automox. My area of focus is enterprise security tools and security automation, primarily tying together our security tools, security and monitoring tools for data enrichment or automated response processes. Also deal a little bit with, of course, compliance and operationalizing those tools. So automation comes into play, of course, with the user side of that, enabling users to interact with our tools in ways to improve their experience, right?
That's great. That's great. Thanks, Randall. Facundo, why don't you go next?
Yes, sure. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Facundo Giuliani. I'm a developer relations engineer at Storyblok in the developer relations team at the company. What we try to do is to make the work easier for the developers to use Storyblok and to integrate the platform into their projects. In order to do that, we create content, we write articles, guides, we create code samples, integrations with other tools and services. And well, speaking about automation, what we try to do is to automate tools and processes that they need to do when they are integrating a headless content management system into their projects. So what we try to do is to automate tools that are used by the developers to create their projects.
So to really streamline the process of both using your tools as well as getting value, kind of out of the headless CMS platform. Yeah. Did I get that sort of right?
Yes. I mean, what we try to do is, at the developer relations team, we don't work on the project on the headless content management system. What we try to do is to create these tools to get the best experience when using the product, right? The platform.
Got it. Perfect. And last and probably best, right? But Kathleen, you'll prove that to us, But Kathleen, why don't you just say hello for a minute or two?
Hey, my name is Kathleen Millar, and also a developer relations engineer at Storyblock, and Facundo pretty much described everything that we do and how we're related to automation. I'm actually personally new to the automation space. I'm pretty new to Storyblock anyway, so I'm learning every day.
That's great. That's great. And again, I think one of the things that we can talk about, and that's probably a good segue into, the start of our discussion, our panel on automation, is really to kind of, understand that we've got a whole bunch of different, backdrops for why automation really makes sense, right? And I'll throw out a couple of ideas here, and then, would love to have everybody expand on it. But to hit on Kathleen's point, right, we've got a whole bunch of new folks that are coming into all of these different spaces, right? Whether it's security, whether it's IT ops, whether it's developer relations, DevOps, cloud computing. I mean, the reality is, given kind of all of the demand that we have for these kinds of services, it's absolutely, again, critical that we get folks on board and we get them as productive as possible as quickly as we can, right? So I would posit automation could be interesting from that standpoint. We've got not enough people, right? Not enough people in order to do things. So that's another area where, again, having the machines doing some stuff could certainly help out from that standpoint. So from your perspective, and I'm not playing favorites, whoever wants to jump in first, what are some of the benefits that you found in terms of introducing automation to your specific, kind of workflows and kind of your job responsibilities? Who wants to take a first cut at that one?
I can start. Cool. So, well, I mean, speaking about automation, or what I see, and not only in development or IT or security, but in general, when we automate something, is because we discover, or we see that there's a task that is repetitive, and that we are always spending time on doing that task, and that can be simplified in a certain way, or like we can implement some kind of process that can avoid us to spend a significant amount of time doing something that, being automated, would take less time. Probably going philosophical, let's say, but the only resource, I mean, one of the only resources that we human beings have in the world, that we can't get back. I mean, we can run out of money, and there's always a way of getting money back, but not the time. I mean, when we spend the time won't get back to us. So trying to see the best way of using our time, or how to say, focusing our time on the tasks that really matter, instead of spending time that we are using to execute other tasks, or I don't know, we are spending on certain process that can be done in a different way, to avoid that time, or to again automate, or have a certain tool that take care of that. For me, is super valuable, right?
Great. Anybody else? Randall, you had come off mute, so.
Yeah, sort of building off of that, I think, time is a great thing, a great driver for a reason to do automation, outside of even just humans spending time, but in a business world, an amount of time between interactions in the business and in the security space, that becomes increasingly important for the time that an event happens to the time that you respond to that event, right? So being able to recover some time between something happening in your environment and responding to it is another great place where automation comes into the mix, and is also time relative. And customer-facing side of that, I think, is also really valuable to talk about. Historically, IT and security tools have sort of had a detachment of a human layer between somebody interfacing with their support or their security representatives for having something changed, and integrating with other platforms to enable users to initiate some changes with controls, et cetera, in place. definitely adds something unique to user experience, I think, from sort of the way that we have done business over the last 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, right? I hadn't kind of figured or talked much about or thought much about, kind of the actual improvement to, kind of the customer experience, or even, kind of the UX, when they don't have to do a whole bunch of manual stuff, kind of in between there. Yeah, that's great. Colby, you had something? Or?
Yeah, I was gonna actually build off of that too. Not only is that you have that improvement experience, but you also have a reliability factor, which also gets rolled into play. Us being just people and human beings, naturally, we make mistakes every now and then. Even if we make a plan that's 100% foolproof, there's always that little 0.0001% chance that something go wrong. And then when we introduce automation to these processes, a lot of times we kind of reduce or eliminate completely that percentage of error that you can run into. I mean, there's other things that could also run into issues with automation. Well, of course, not everything is completely perfect, but at the same time, we do kind of remove that human element of error from there when we run through those processes.
Humans make errors, Colby? Is that that's the
as hard as it is
supposition
believed?
here?
As hard as it is believed.
Not you. And dealing with endpoints, I suspect you see more often than not, kind of stuff along those lines.
Definitely. It happens every now
The
and
stories you could tell, right? The stories you could tell.
then. Oh, yeah.
That's great. Kathleen, do you have anything? I don't want to put you on the spot, right? I mean, I know, we've got a lot of great comments there. So,
I was just wondering, like, how, like, you want to automate something, but then there's always room for, do you have room for human error, like, all the time when you code stuff and try to automate things? Like, do you make space for that, or is it just like, oh, we'll just deal with it, like, when it happens?
Coming from my experience, I think that you do have to build in that expectation a little bit. There is some element of a lot of testing and things that go into it. Colby, you've been doing a lot of that recently. What's been your experience with it?
Oh yeah, and definitely a good thing that helps with that is just the code being like verbose about the results that it has, or any errors that come up through the entire process. Just making sure that you have knowledge of what the error is when it does come up.
yeah, and I would think, when you're playing it out, and I guess this kind of brings up, kind of one of the operational constructs that I tend to use in a lot of discussions, and that's, I'll call it a playbook mentality, right? Which is, or think about it as intentionality would be another way to put it, right? You want to design your operational motions around a very discrete set of activities that you can execute consistently and effectively every single time, right? And kind of that playbook mentality, to your point, Kathleen, gives you kind of the ability to really map out how you want that process to work, and use automation technology to both orchestrate as well as automate some of those capabilities where it makes sense. And obviously the operational motions are going to necessarily be different than something that's going to be customer facing within a UX or within an application. I know the Automox guys have a bunch of worklets that you can, bring to bear within your own tool. And then that's kind of customer facing. So you have to, kind of make sure that error handling and a number of those other, kind of edge cases get tested. But if it's just a core, I need to integrate data from here, pop it into here, and then do that with it. Again, I think that's pretty, kind of straightforward. And as long as you do kind of the work up front to plan it out, you're in a pretty good shape. You're in pretty good shape to, kind of make sure that you're designing and implementing the processes as you see it. Great. So when we kind of think, we talk a little bit about, again, time, right? We talk about efficiency and reducing, human error, as strange it is to think that humans make errors. Are there other kind of intangible type activities or benefits that we have with automation, right? I mean, we've had a couple of discussions, as we headed into the panel, and some of you brought up, some interesting things that I wouldn't normally have thought about. Oh, hey, that goes into my ROI calculator, right, for automation, but really, especially in this kind of environment, 2 years of kind of Zoom and sitting in our home offices and not really interacting with folks, that automation could present as well. Does anybody have any ideas on that front?
Yeah, I can start off with that one. I think it does offer some benefits. When we talk about making it feel like you're not doing redundant work, I mean, that is something that, depending on where you're coming from, there is a want to do something different over time, or there is a want to improve something over time. And I think automation offers a good way to iteratively improve a process. So you don't have to automate everything at once. And I think that's a common misconception when you first jump into it, is to think that you have to tackle it all. But really, I mean, there's ROI, or there is some gain back from even just investing a little bit of automation and then building on that as you go, as you become more comfortable with it in your environment. And you recover some of that time the next time that thing happens, even if it's only 20 or 30 seconds of your time. It does build up, especially if something is very common in your environment. So yeah, I think there is something to be appreciated there for feeling like you don't have to maybe tackle problems or spend as much time on problems doing the same repetitive tasks over and over.
Job satisfaction, right? I mean, Facundo, please.
No. I was going to say something different, but yeah, I mean, from that point of view, I totally agree. On the other hand, probably like something that you can directly identify is if you are working on an organization with different teams, with different responsibilities and different tasks, like automating processes that automating processes that normally are done by a different team, where you have a dependency on them, will make the work easier. So you won't need that much, interdependency between the different teams. So that makes the work easier for all the teams in the company. I mean, the team that requires something from another team and the other team that has to solve those issues. And well, you start generating this synergy of the things flowing better or easier, let's say, and not having dependencies between the different teams, which makes I mean, having to deal with people from other team or other tasks, it's not that it's bad, or it's not that you have bad partners or colleagues, but it takes time, it takes debates, it takes like having to stop doing something to ask or to depend on someone else. It's like those kind of things can be avoided if you automate tasks or processes that involve different teams of a company.
Yeah, I would ditto that. I think some of the best experiences that we've had collaboratively have been in generating cross-team or dependent team automation. I think that's a really good call out.
Yeah, I would say facilitating orchestration between companies, right? And what's interesting is that as your company gets bigger, you have more issues around those lines, right? When it's 8 or 10 folks, you kind of know where to go, right? When you've got 50, there are different problems. You've got 100, then you've got 1,000, right? I mean, the problems really magnify. And again, that's kind of why I started and honed in on the whole, kind of intentionality of, what you want these operational processes to look like. Because without that firm idea, I mean, yeah, you can certainly automate. And I know a number of folks that take this approach, right? They do something the same a whole bunch of times and they're like, I want to automate it, right? But I would make the case that if you take a step back and you say, okay, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, and that's great. So I do want to figure out a way to do this more intelligently, but is my process correct, right? Am I doing it correctly? Just because I'm doing it in a certain way doesn't mean that there's not a better way to go do that. And taking a step back and really planning out of this playbook mentality I was talking about really gives you the opportunity and really the impetus to ask a lot of those questions and to really refine what it is that you're doing over time. And one of the other things that I kind of drew out of that really gets back to a job satisfaction thing, right? Folks like to, and there have been surveys, in all aspects of technology for dozens of years. And again, I know it doesn't look it, but I'm old enough to have been, kind of around for dozens of years and different cycles between, different product types of environments and really evolutions and cycles and all of that. And all the surveys continue to come back that if you challenge folks, right, and if you give them new and interesting and innovative projects to work on and not just have them doing roughly the equivalent of an assembly line, type of environment, that increases job satisfaction, right? So whether it's planning out these automations, whether it's being the beneficiary, which gives you the ability to do more strategic things, right? I think there is a benefit that we don't talk about very much, which is really keeping our employees engaged and in an environment where we don't have enough of them and we need to make better use of both their time and, keeping them, interested and engaged in the job, right? I think that these are opportunities where folks looked at it from they were scared. Oh my God, is this going to, force me to get rid of all these people? It's like, well, no. If you help them be more efficient, they're going to be more engaged in their job, right? If you give them the opportunity to build out a number of these different automations, they'll gain and derive better satisfaction out of their environment. Again, I just don't think a lot of folks, really think about it from that perspective.
Yeah, and I think similarly, not only just the satisfaction side of it, but a lot of businesses are really entrenched in reactionary type, operations.
Yeah,
like operate only after things have happened rather than planning ahead. So I think it also gives you some ability to sort of take on a more proactive approach to your environment.
Get out ahead of it, right? And as a security practitioner, Randall, I know that's kind of like been the holy grail, right? It's like,
Absolutely.
wait, I get plan out this thing and know what I'm going to do when this category of alert, kind of hits the, hits the sim and I've got to, have that motion or Colby on your front, right? Kind of somebody clicks on the wrong thing or, has a request to update their device or wants new software. I mean, having all that, stuff really streamlined, again, takes both the variance and really improves the efficiency, which again increases customer satisfaction, which I think was another point that Randall was making before. Great. So let's kind of continue on with the discussion and really talk about the what, right? We talked about the why, we got into a little bit of the what, but specifically around the what, I don't know, and not sure who wants to start off, this part of the discussion, but are there specific use cases that, where you're just like, yeah, this I automated and it made such a huge difference in, kind of my ability to do my job. And I would guess, you all have, kind of significant examples of these things that you could point to that really make a difference in kind of your day-to-day environment. And I'm not sure who wanted to jump in on that one.
Sure. Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Probably the biggest one for IT is probably the on-off boarding process when a new person starts. Where's all their equipment? Where are they getting? What software do they need access to? What information do they need to receive? And typically, especially in smaller environments, smaller corporations, it's usually a IT person meeting one-on-one in a timer period where a new employee is going through just 10 or 15 different meetings, meeting all different business leaders, getting used to everything. They're constantly switching focus shifts between one department or another, and then IT comes along and we're trying to switch yet again. Taking the factor of meeting one-on-one out of that and having a lot of it just automated to where they receive the machine, second they pop it up, it has a welcome screen instructing them what to do, And kind of like when you get as a consumer and you get your first cell phone or you get a new computer, it just automatically walks you through all the automated steps of signing in, get yourself orientated. Not only does that reduce the amount of time needed to go through those on offboarding processes, lightening IT's load, but it also gives a really like white glove experience to the end user going through that, to where they feel they're in a very established company. They're going through a very smooth and finalized operational procedure to get everything set up and onboarded, and they just feel a lot more confident going through all those different departments and going through all the other steps of onboarding through the first week or so.
Yeah, that's great. And you know, so the thing that when you're going through that, Colby, the thing that kind of really resonated to me is like, sometimes you get a new piece of equipment, right? And you open the thing up, and we're hackers, right? So we just pop it open, we'll just start playing with it, and then hopefully nothing blows up, right? It's a new thing. Hopefully it didn't blow anything up on that front. But you look, and there are some shops where you open up the box and there's a huge, like, it looks almost like a poster, with big pictures and check boxes. And you're just like, okay, do this and then do this. And that's not automation, but that's really helping to manage the customer's expectations about, what's there. And then you open up other ones and they got a manual about, yay thick. And you're like, oh man, there's no way I'm reading, of that thing, right? And it just from a user experience standpoint, totally turns it off. So, having been through this, right? So I actually started a job, 2 weeks ago, a new job, and I went through this, right? So it was the whole provisioning process, which, and again, to the fairly small company, we got about 30 something people in my new shop, and but it went fairly smoothly, right? I mean, I had all my applications there. My email was set up. I was able to get into our CRM and kind of start to look at different things. And I didn't have all the permissions I needed, right? But then through another team, I was able to route a request to the appropriate group, when I needed, kind of an additional, and it really impacted, right, my initial experience with the company. It wasn't like these are a bunch of bozos, right? It was, oh my God, these folks have their act together, right? And yeah, I mean, and it makes a huge difference, especially when you're trying to make that first impression with a new employee. So that's fantastic. I think that's great. Now, did you build all that stuff yourself, or was that kind of a collaboration with the IAM group and the, kind of a bunch of the systems folks?
Yeah, you do have to definitely do a lot of collaboration. There's you have to have least access privileges to make sure you keep security happy. You have to make sure that you set up a lot of the email automation for HR so they can coordinate with the employee and give them information as well in a nice and orderly fashion. It's a multi-step process where they have to go through, actually sign the paperwork to get started onboarded, and then actually set up the meeting. So yeah, definitely collaborative process between many different departments and teams. Just making sure that everyone has all their ducks in a row.
No, that's great. And you figured out a way to make security people happy. Is that what you kind of inferred?
Well, okay. Not happy. I should say content. Randall,
Yeah.
is that right? Content?
Or not angry at
Not
any
scared.
time, right?
Yeah, not scared.
Not
all
fearful.
The time.
Yeah.
All right. So Randall, do you have one you wanted to dive into?
Yeah. I think the original question was like high impact or what area automation have we experienced, and I think one on the security side, and it's a little bit different because your customers are quite different, but getting automation into endpoint client security tools has been probably one of the biggest impact items for our team, and probably across other organizations I've been at as well. Generally, whenever a tool is installed on user machines, whether that be I don't know, AV or a proxy or whatever, typically those tools just kind of exist, and you don't really get a way to interact with them. So we've been trying to build automations around those that enable some features for ways for employees to interact with those endpoint tools in ways that enables them to continue business for minor changes to the environment. For instance, some of those things are I'm having problems with my client, or I suspect that my AV is responsible for some performance issue in my environment. We writing automations that enable the security team to quickly look at and identify issues and coming down from a user's machine is one thing that I've seen. And it does take collaboration as well, what Colby was talking about with our teams, because part of that is that we want to enable those tools for other teams as well. So whenever we write automations for managing our endpoint stuff, then we can share it with IT, and then that improves the user experience, both from the employee perspective, the IT perspective, and for the security team.
Yeah, that's great. Could you get a little bit more? Because I'm curious about this, right? Being a security guy in most of my day. So you've got the agent, and the agent, kind of fires off some type of, kind of what, an alert? Is it something? And then you start to automate and take action. Can you quarantine them, there? Do you kind of go down to that level, from a security standpoint?
Yeah, so part of it you can integrate into a SOAR is one way to do it. So doing automatic quarantine under certain types of events. The other side of it is more about user experience. Implementing we have a proxy in our environment. So developers have some specialized configurations with that. So I think one of the most used automations that we have is an automation that we deploy through our agent, our endpoint management agent Automox, for configuring developer environments to deal with that proxy. So that was one of the better opportunities for us to really showcase, how we enable them to have self-service for that type of activity. Originally, that script was manually run. We would run it, either at interval, or we would go in and run it on people's machines, and then we worked with IT to get that turned into a worklet and have it now be an on-demand type thing. But it goes through and configures a bunch of environment variables and software configurations that enable developers to kind of get up and go whenever they start having proxy issues.
Okay.
And so it solves a large majority of those problems. To the other point, there is other automations as well on the source side for incident response. But those are a little bit more in the weeds, I would say.
Yeah, but that's part of it, right? I mean, is that depending on where you're at in the process? I mean, or kind of the tech stack. I mean, you can get extremely granular about kind of the things that you're doing. So that's a great example. Facundo or Kathleen, do you have anything you wanted to talk about? I mean, you're working with developers all the time. You mentioned that you're helping them to streamline kind of their ability to use your tool to manage their content. So what are some of the things you guys have worked on?
Yeah, probably from a developer point of view, about the task that can be automated or that are evaluated to be automated. One of the typical tasks that I usually see in development teams are the testing of the software of the products that they are creating, right? Because it's let's say easy to introduce a bug or to change certain process or to change certain feature in the product that you are creating, in the website, in the application that you are creating, and breaking a feature that was previously working and it's not working anymore because you introduced that change. So having to test all the features or all the processes that are involved in your project, in your application, it's kind of a long task. And when you are adding more and more features to your product, you have to test more and more features. So during the last years, a lot of tools appear to automate the testing, to go through all the different, I mean, even though that you have to create these tests, it's way easier to write the test once using these tools to automate the test and run it whenever you are deploying a new version of your product or whenever you are releasing a new feature of your product. It's super helpful to avoid breaking the product, right? I mean, to nobody wants to release a product that is failing or that has a bug or introduce a bug that is making something to go wrong or to fail that was working before, right? So that's one of the processes that I see that is usually automated when talking about development in general. I mean, any type of product, right?
Yeah, totally agree. Right. So I think that, from the standpoint of, doing a number of those regression tests and making sure that, you don't miss anything and create other issues. And the one thing I do want to point out, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we talk about the how, is that automations are code. Right. So I think now they may be low code, right, depending on how you do that. And there are certainly tools that make you make it a lot easier, right, to kind of script out these things. But we also should be fairly candid about the fact that, when you build an automation and you're interacting or orchestrating a number of different systems, those systems change, right? And your requirements change. And to your point, Facundo, sometimes you need to go back and make sure that all this stuff still works, because if you don't, before you release new capabilities or something happens, your customers will let you know, right? Because when things break and it doesn't work as they expect, they're usually pretty good about letting you know. So that's one thing that folks, when they say, oh, we'll just automate everything, that is something that a lot of folks don't necessarily, kind of take into account, is the amount of resource that's also going to be required to maintain the automations. And they get it, it's like any cost benefit analysis, right? Buy versus build, or any of those other, things that you do. In most cases, folks do get sufficient value to warrant the investment, but it is an investment, right? Colby, you spend some time maintaining these things, right? Randall, I know you do. Facundo, Kathleen, I know that that's part of, kind of the process, which is, these things. It's kind of like, again, anything else that you code, right? It's there. And if you don't keep it up to date, it is going to, kind of erode in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, sure. And sorry, related to what we were discussing before, that it's like, it's not that you are, it's not that the people is going to lose their jobs. I mean, it's like probably it's more interesting or more valuable for a company to actually create the test, the automated test that will run every time you are introducing a new feature or releasing a new product, than actually manually testing the product, right? I mean, which is a list of steps that you have to follow the same list of steps over and over again whenever you want to verify that everything is correct and nobody's failing, right? So, I mean, related again with the motivation and probably, how to say, getting the advantage of your team and your human force to actually improve the way that you are using to test your products, to test the capabilities of your products, and instead of doing a manual job that can be easily improved.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The other thing, before we kind of jump into the next one, which I think is really about the how do we get going, right? And I think we'll use, again, Colby, Randall, kind of your examples about what it is that you built. I do want to just, kind of set the bar a little bit, right? And I've spoken, again, to, hundreds of different security practitioners about, this specific topic. And you usually get kind of a couple of different perspectives there, right? One is, again, I'm doing, the same repetitive thing over and over again, and I'm tired of doing that, so I'm just going to automate it. And those tend to be the folks that are, using Python or, some other scripting language just to bootstrap the stuff because they just don't want to do it, or macros if you're, kind of any of the office, kind of environments and that kind of thing. And then there are other folks who view automation is almost like a religious thing, right? That it's an imperative, a moral imperative for them. And I've spoken to folks who are just like, I want to automate everything. Well, what do you mean everything? And they're like, everything, right? I mean, if there's an opportunity, then, and my people are doing something, I want to figure out how it is that I can automate it. And those folks actually, to take it back to that code example, Facundo, that you were talking about, these are folks that actually hire coders, right? I mean, developers, and they are in operational groups. So I knew, and this was a little bit of an edge case, right? They were a cloud first organization. They had no on-prem stuff, right? Everything was remote. But this and he ran both IT ops and security, had about 40 people on his team, and 5 of them were developers. So a full 10% of this, manager's operational team were just developers that were building these playbooks when they perceive that, hey, I've got an operational motion that can be automated. So then we're going to just go do that. Right. So that's a philosophical thing that folks are coming at it with, this is just how we do business. Right. I'm not saying that works for everybody. I'm not saying that that's the right thing to do. I'm just saying that that's kind of the logical end goal to, this approach, right? And this philosophy is that I'm going to do automation, and that's going to be like some folks say, I'm going to be in the cloud first, right? I'm not even going to think about on-prem stuff. Everything that I'm doing is from the cloud. Other operational managers go, everything I'm going to do is going to be automated, and I have to be convinced why, if I am going to have some kind of manual operational motion on that front. So let's talk a little bit about how we get there, right? So we took two very kind of cool different use cases there that Randall and Colby, brought forward. Right? How do you get that? How do you start? Right? So Colby, let's start with you, right? Because that's provisioning. Everybody has to deal with that, right? So that's probably a good place to start. So you map it out. What does this process look like? When we talked about you had to collaborate with a bunch of folks. So again, how do you get started with, what, I think I want to automate a bunch of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, for me, definitely the main point of how I got started was just particularly our IT department at that smaller company I was talking about a little bit ago. We wanted to set a certain standard of service. And I come from a customer service background, tons of time doing making food and working in concession stands and stuff like that in the past. So, stuff's kind of baked in my blood. And typically when you try to do things one-on-one or a manual process, you start to lose a little bit of customer service. It happens. People take time off, or they're just not feeling good on certain days. So when you want to deliver a certain standard of service consistently, that's when automation is your main thing to look at. In particular, especially when the starting provisioning of people into a new company, that automation comes in the form of MDM controls with automated program and software provisioning devices to make sure that when people start off, they have the software they need on their computer that very same day. As soon as they start in, you don't have to do anything, no outside intervention. So yeah, definitely say customer service and making sure you have a really good quality of service is a really good starting point to push you over the edge and get you started into the automation world.
So you're doing that automatic. So you're going to poll somebody's device, see what they have. If they don't have all the stuff they need, then you'll just, kind of automatically download that. I understand that.
Right, correct. And on top of that, not only is it just, any device that gets added in, but who does the device belong to? So you're talking about role-based access and role-based provisioning for what they need access to and what gets pushed on their devices. So it's really, setting up that plan of saying this person is a developer or this person is going to sales. These are the packages that I want to have installed on their computer, and go. And that's kind of how you get started and start making manual adjustments every once in a while. Like Randall said, it's not an immediate process, so you don't start off with everything. I think I started off with just like one or two apps here and there, and maybe, one or two different settings. And then eventually you get into all these different provisional packages that changed based off of what someone is doing in particular.
Yep. Did you have a roadmap that you kind of do to manage this, or was it more organic?
It was more organic. So you kind of start off with doing what you can, the little nice to haves, and then you just have that feeling want to do more and more and getting more professional, and it just incrementally builds up from there.
Yeah, and then developers develop, right? Then you end up, just takes on a life of its own. I need to move the box here, or you start messing around with the UX that way. I get that. I may have done that once or twice. Now what about testing? I mean, was it just you? Kind of, did you have to build up fresh machines in order to kind of test out the automations, or guinea pigs, or
Yeah, definitely a test environment is really something that's great to have. Especially ideally you'd want to have like a whole lab of about like 15, 20 machines. Sometimes can't always do that, but you do the best with what you have. I remember, especially at that smaller company, I was sitting there with probably about 5 or 10 different machines all around me, and I'm constantly resetting them, wiping them, re-enrolling them. and kind of look like a madman, just with like or one of those guys that has like a keyboard going all the way around them, trying to get all the different machines set up at the same time. So yeah, definitely testing is a really great idea for that.
Yeah. And have, and I would imagine that you guys have a reasonably decent, lab and QA set up around, endpoint devices, given what your business is, right? Are you leveraging any of that, kind of kit or structure as you're, building out the automations from a test bed standpoint?
Definitely, we utilize virtual machine lab environment infrastructure as well as some manual device testing. I definitely have quite a big stack of machines just kind of on the side waiting for me to do some sort of testing with it.
Yeah.
It's kind of the usual case with any IT admin.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. So Randall, is your experience, kind of similar on that front? You planned it out and then, you started small and it started to, kind of grow and you built it out that way, and then testing and burning it in. And, can you describe, kind of the process with this, endpoint automation that you were referring to before for us?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a very different, security automation typically tends to be more towards the infrastructure, tool integration side, less so on the endpoint, but they are very different realms of thought or realms of thinking whenever you're implementing automation for those. So yeah, I mean, the client side one, we have test groups for security. Typically, you have your low risk, high feedback groups that opt into early access or getting into programs in the business that are sort of I guess endpoint testing groups, right? So you'll pick a few people from each department who have maybe an unusual setup, or people in departments who are very communicative with your security or IT teams, and get them enrolled in those programs, because you kind of want to have those canaries in your environment, right? You want to be able to roll something out, get good feedback, make sure that it's not really impacting people. And so you kind of start with that, and then you build your automation and you start testing it. Some of it is test machines, or lab equipment, virtualized lab equipment. On the endpoint side, whenever you get more into security automation and on the back end and stuff like that, that's where it gets a little bit more tricky, because you have to have entire infrastructure stacks that are separate from your production stack. So you have to replicate your security environments, virtualize your security environments for testing to make sure that you're not going to break production. So it does change quite a bit. Similar concept implemented differently. Yeah, and then you just write little bits at a time. So find two tools that you look at, where you realize that you spend either a lot of time or processes that are just inefficient to wait for somebody to action on, and start with those. Save time between your security tools talking to one another, or time between customer requests, and servicing those requests with a security tool, whether that be policy changes or testing for errors in the logs or something like that. And then just sort of iterate on it. To your point, playbooks feed into that really whenever you get into the SOAR side, so security orchestration side, where you want to take something from one system and enrich that with things coming from 2, 3, 4 other systems. It really starts to build at that point as soon as you start integrating multiple sources.
That's right. And I think with the idea being to magnify the value of any one tool by combining that data with a number of others, right? And ultimately impacting the environment. So one thing, Facundo or Kathleen, did you have a specific example you wanted to go through as well? And no is an okay answer too. I mean, that's fine too. I don't want to. Okay.
No, sure. I can mention one example that we face usually with the developer relations team, but sometimes what we try to evaluate is the behavior of the developers, for instance, working with the platform StoryBlock in particular, but when creating their projects. And what we try to analyze is like boilerplates that they have to create to start a new project or to integrate with the platform, or a task that they have to, I mean, that probably it's the same task that different developers are doing or are executing in different projects. And what we try to do is to abstract those tasks in a way that we can automate them, and they don't have to write the same code over and over again for all the other projects, right? So that's one of the things that we usually do in the developer relations team, like trying to create these tools, or again, when we say making the work easier for the developers, it's like exactly that, not having to spend time on tasks or operations that can be automated and done because they are always the same or they are pretty similar for no matter the project that the developers are working on, right?
So like in initializing a JavaScript environment with common libraries or something for React, as an example.
Exactly. I mean, if it's going to be the same code or the same initialization or very similar for all the projects that you are going to create, why you have to create 10 files to put the names, to write these words here, and there. There are a lot of applications that generate some starter or some code. Yeah, I mean, boilerplate, as I said before, which is a starting point for a new project, and then you can expand from there, right? So those are examples that we try to identify between the different developers and try to create these tools to make their work easy.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. One other thing I want to dive into before we kind of transition a little bit into the trends discussion is the idea of communicating the value of these automations, right? So yeah, sure, there's the impact of the enhanced customer experience, right? In Colby's case and in Fagundo's case as well, right? That's all about making it better for, kind of whoever the end customer is. In Randall's case, it's about making the environment more efficient, right? And organizing a lot of these different things. But what I've also found we forget to do, mostly because we're technical folks and we don't care about that stuff, is actually, take a second to communicate, kind of the value of these things. And a couple of different, kind of tips that I usually, relay to a mostly technical audience, right? And it's totally fine when I say this, be like, oh, what are you talking about, right? But it's just quick acronym, right? ABS, right? Always be selling. And that's, well, I went into technology, so I didn't have to sell, right? I didn't want to carry the bag. I didn't want to have to ask folks for money. That was not, ever anything I ever wanted to do. But regardless of what it is that we're working on, especially when you've got, in some cases, a high profile type of initiative, or certainly something that's going to be high impact on that front, we want to make sure that we're in a position to communicate, the value of what it is that we're doing, why we're spending the time to do that, why we're potentially asking for, kind of additional resources or tooling or what have you, in order to execute on these environments. All right. So always be selling. And the other thing, which I think both Colby and Randall and Fagundo, really alluded to, right, is what I'll call a quick win, right? Which is, how do I start small, get some momentum, start to build behind that? And that gets back to, I think, a point that everybody made, which was about what I'll call boiling the ocean. Right? Really difficult to boil the ocean. So you want to start small. You want to get that quick win. You want to publicize that quick win. You want to promote that quick win. And then you want to move on to, again, expanding the capabilities, hopefully fairly quickly, right? But, kind of depending on what the roadmap is, from that perspective, because without doing that, right, you're not, Bill, I mean, folks, and especially Randall, in your point, right? A lot of this stuff is behind the scenes. And nobody really appreciates that until you're doing a whole mess of stuff with not a lot of people. And then, the senior management just thinks, oh, that's how you do stuff, right? That's how it is for everybody. And then it's like, well, no, right? I spent a crap ton of time, trying to, orchestrate everything so that we can get the leverage out of the people that we have.
Yeah, I think the way that it comes up in security circles when you talk about a security team doing a good job is they only get noticed when they make mistakes.
That's right. So I'll tell a little funny story, then we can move on to the next one. But you know, people having done security for a long time, everybody always says, you security people are a little, you know, I don't want to say strange, but strange, right? I don't really understand, you know, what is that? Why, how is it that you're, you know, why do you like that? Can you tell me a little bit about these folks that do security? I say, well, just think about the typical security person's day, right? And when you go home at night, you know, you're talking hopefully to your significant other or friend or family, and they go, you know, how was your day today? And you go back and say, my day was great. And they look, say, well, your day was great. What happened? What was so great about your day? They're like, you know what happened today? Nothing happened today. It was a great day. Nothing happened, right? And that's really, you know, when I think about how do I explain a security person's mentality to somebody, it's that. A great day is when nothing happens, because anything that can happen in a security context or desktop management or developer relations then is usually not great, right? When I get called into something, it's usually not great. So if nothing happens, that's a great day. And folks have always been like, now I sort of understand why you're a little wacky, you know, you security folks on that front. So on that, you know, happy
it's like going back home after a doctor appointment, like, right? Like,
yeah,
how is everything? Oh,
Exactly.
like last time I went. Oh, so that's great,
exactly
right?
right.
Like, everything
Or
is
a
the same.
flight, right? You know, how was your flight? Uneventful, awesome.
Yeah.
On time and uneventful. So great. So let's kind of spend the next 15 minutes or so that we have left. You know, specifically on some of these trends, right? And we had a couple of these discussions coming in here, but and I alluded to one of them, and really the first one up front, right? You know, and it's cloud. So you can't really get away or have any kind of discussion, you know, without including cloud and what it is that you're doing. I mean, you guys at Automox or SaaS, you know, platform, right? Facundo, I'm pretty sure Storyblock is a SaaS platform that you do that, right? So you've got that. So, you know, when you think about, you know, kind of how cloud works, how, you know, kind of whether it's SaaS ops or infrastructure as a service, you guys have any perspectives on it? And Randall, I mean, I know a lot of your kit is, you know, kind of going to be cloud-based on that front. So, you know, has kind of being in the cloud and having a lot of your specific tools that are cloud-based, I mean, has that impacted your ability to, you know, automate a number of things negatively, positively? I mean, makes no difference to you. You know, is there anything that cloud brings that kind of, you know, helps or hinders your ability to automate?
Yeah, I mean, I would, from a security practitioner standpoint, cloud is sort of it opens up a workshop of tools that are typically lacking in data center security space. Prior to coming to Automox, I was in data center centric security roles, and so or hybrid roles, I guess is a good way to say it. But it is definitely a different set of controls or a set of visibility. The layers that you have available to you for decision making are, it's difficult to envision how you can possibly connect everything. Whereas before it was difficult just to come up with how to connect two things, but now you have all of it. And what do you really do with that information? And I think maybe the biggest impact to going to cloud or even these cloud first companies, in my mind, and actually something that we sort of skipped over when we were talking about, you know, how to automate, is inventory. Inventory is one of the most difficult things in a data center environment to create or manage over any period of time, because the environment changes so regularly and the systems responsible for managing that environment are so disparate that a lot of times it requires manual activity for somebody to do that, or some level of manual activity. And so I would say that's, you know, maybe one of the biggest gains for going to cloud is just it's the inventory of not only systems but applications, right? Because cloud gives you introspection into what workloads you have running up there. It gives you a lot of insight into your environment, ability to make decisions on your environment that would otherwise be difficult to build metrics around.
Yeah. No, that's those are great points, and you know, again, kind of the whole idea of you know, kind of addressability, and you know, to me, it's not it's inventory is a side benefit, a critical benefit, right? But a side benefit because you know, you can address almost everything you want to do in the cloud via an API. Right. So when you think about, you know, kind of what's a precursor to making sure that you can, you know, develop and build out these automations, it's how am I going to integrate with a lot of these systems? And you know, again, I'm old enough to remember, you know, kind of first generation SIMs when you know, kind of you had 2 people working on the back end and 10 people working on connectors. Right. And you know, because these were proprietary interfaces that you had to, you know, kind of build and then maintain to a bunch of these different systems. And we were just pulling telemetry at that point. Right. Once you started actually trying to manage these systems, it just got, you know, an order of magnitude, you know, more complicated. So these publicly available APIs, right, the contracts that allow you to integrate, you know, what capabilities are there, you know, really are just a huge boon to being able to, you know, build out these environments. And cloud is, again, all about the APIs. So that's, you know, really facilitated, you know, kind of that perspective.
Yeah, and I would say it's not just systems in terms of inventory, but also roles and users and accounts and applications, right? If you build containers in the cloud, now you have pretty much a bill of materials on what's on that system if you're indexing what's coming in out of your containers. So it is very interesting, that change, that dynamic change from the security space. But
I probably, I mean, not only in the security space, but you see a lot of, I mean, the cool thing about the cloud is that you can go as deep as you need, right? I mean, if I have a super small team and I need to release a project as soon as possible, and I don't have the people or the amount of team members that I need to set up something big, or not big, but set up something that I need for my project, you can rely on a cloud service to do that. You know, I mean, talking about security, for instance, you will have different needs depending your business, depending your organization, but you even have like companies that offers you security platforms for authentication and authorization, and the only thing that you need to do, for instance, from a code point of view, is connecting to the API, and they will manage all the user roles, you know, the permissions and etc. And I mean, if you don't have people that it's experience on those topics, or even if you have and you prefer that people to be focused on other tasks that are biggest priorities, or that probably are more crucial for your project, it's a help that allows you to, again, to move faster, to get how to say, the earlier goals that you are projecting for your project, right?
Velocity,
Velocity.
Yeah, and even beyond security, right? Like you could do like managed IT and managed HR and managed legal, like everything's a service. So I think it's definitely fed into that. That's a great point.
Which is, you know, talking about velocity, let's hit, you know, kind of the second big trend, and then we'll, you know, wrap up at least this part of the thing. I mean, we could go all day, right, folks? I mean, I could literally sit and talk all day about, you know, automation and the use cases and, you know, kind of the interesting and the pitfalls and all that, you know, kind of stuff. But let's talk for a sec about DevOps, and this, Facundo and Kathleen, this may be a little bit more in your wheelhouse. Because, you know, to me, again, that's really predicated upon automation, right? It's the idea that I'm going to commit, you know, code or do a pull request, however it is that you do that, code gets merged, and then, you know, you have a bolt integration step, which is, you know, this idea of gathering a bunch of information, you know, and then ability to run a whole mess of tests on it, right? Automatically, right? And then it gets promoted into different, and you run another test on it automatically. So all of that, you know, stuff is automated from that perspective, which again, you know, kind of contributes to, the velocity there. But, you know, really, and people are just like, DevOps, and I don't understand it, right? Because it's a philosophy. It's not a thing. You don't go down to the corner stop and go like, oh, I'll take, you know, a Gatorade and a DevOps, right? You don't do that. There's no DevOps SKU on something, right? So it really is a, you know, kind of an environment that encompasses everything, and it's really predicated upon this idea of automation. And again, I think it's a very interesting, you know, kind of evolution of where we're doing. It's not just a, hey, I'm going to get good at some stuff and then I'm going to automate it, right? It's I'm going to build the process with automation in mind, right? So you don't, it's not, we've collapsed that whole thing. It's not, hey, let's work out the process, then automate it. It's the process is automation. And I think that's really a huge nuance beyond even what we're doing, you know, kind of in the cloud.
Yeah, totally. In fact, I mean, probably one of the biggest challenges when creating a product, when creating a website, or even when managing an organization, for instance, is scaling, right? I mean, you can manage 5 people, a team of 5 people, or I don't know, 100 users visiting your website. But when your project gets bigger and bigger and your needs start to increase, it's like managing that or like handling all the traffic that you are going to have in your project, or the amount of users that you have to manage, or the amount of data that you have to manipulate, is a big challenge. And having platforms that help you with that is it's great. I mean, there are a lot of platforms that allows you to deploy a certain project, a certain website, and you have the website up and running there for the users to actually visit them. And you don't have to do anything if you have, I mean, not anything, but it doesn't change if you have 100 users or if you have 1 million users at the same time, you know, because they are taking care of the platforms, the website, the CDNs where the content that you are creating is managed. So that's incredible. I don't know. I remember those days in the 90s when you created a website with front page, Microsoft front page, or Macromedia Dreamweaver, and you have to use the FTP server to manually upload the files and taking care of that, and how the things have changed from those years. And for me, it's awesome.
Facundo, you look great. If you were around when we were building applications in front page, you look great, man. That's fantastic.
Those times.
Old school, my friend, old school.
Yeah.
So great. I want to thank everybody, Colby, Randall, Facundo, Kathleen, you know, thanks for playing along in the panel. I think we brought up a number of, you know, kind of interesting and important topics, again, about the why, you know, thinking about, you know, kind of planning out, being intentional relative to your automations, the what, you know, a lot of the use cases that really impact, you know, your day-to-day job, but also not just how do we streamline our operational motions, right? You can also think about automation from how do we really improve the customer experience. I think there were great examples on a lot of fronts from that perspective. Really the how, you know, planning it out, testing it, making sure that, you know, you understand its code and needs to be maintained over time, right? Those are absolutely, again, critical concepts that we have to, you know, bring to the table on, you know, kind of that front. So, you know, hopefully there was a whole mess of food for thought about how automation can really help your environment, some of the things that you do have to keep in mind. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. So as we see on the slides here, head back to your receptions tab, you know, find the session that's right for you. I know Randall and Colby are going to be talking about, you know, really breaking the barriers and how do you actually do a number of these things? How do you work through some of the issues internally and get automation working? I know Facundo and Kathleen are going to be talking about low code and no code and some of the development aspects of you know, improving, and how do you use automation to make kind of that whole process work a lot better. So a variety of different cases, and again, use the QA, use the chat, interact, but we'll head off to the next thing. I think we'll take a couple minutes in order for us to get into those areas, but go to the breakout rooms and we will see you there.